hello, church family. I'm excited to be here with Jonathan and Holly Smith. We're excited that they're going to be able to share some of the detail about what their life has been like over the past 11 months. And so we have just a few questions that we wanted to ask them. And so we'll start off with what's really been the elephant in every room here in 2020. But can you tell us a little bit about what life's been like in Peru for you and your family and your ministry in light of COVID this year?
Sure. A little bit about Peru. It's a population of about 33 million people. And when COVID started in March, the whole country only had about 100 ICU beds. So that's why the government locked down our country so severely and so thoroughly. They had no choice. The healthcare system just couldn't support a massive outbreak. So that really set into action what we had to live for several months, which was complete isolation. We could only get out of the apartment to go to the bank, to the grocery store, to get healthcare, the pharmacy, and that was it. That went on for almost 3 months. That has not changed. It has been virtual since the middle of March.
Okay.
They are still virtual. We had a church-wide meeting the 1st of November, and we talked about what does it look like for us to get back to meeting in person. And the government has given some guidance as far as what they want you to do, but our interpretation is that in-person meetings can only happen for special events like baptisms or weddings or funerals. So we've been somewhat hesitant to push the envelope on that. There's still discussions of what does it look like, possibly after the first of the year. If you ask me, my best guess right now is we're not going to get back to a physical church meeting until February sometime.
Wow, that's tough. All right, Holly?
Yeah, I think for me and the boys, they had about 5 weeks of in-school classes, and then once lockdown hit, we went 100% virtual. So that was really stressful time. Probably the first 5 or 6 weeks was really hard, just learning how to use a computer and the programs they asked us to use. And Jordan has really struggled emotionally. He's a very high energy kid if you know him, and so he needs to have people to talk to. He needs to be outside, and Peru said that no kids could go outside for the first part of lockdown. And so Jonathan and I were the only two for several months that could go to the grocery store and stuff. That was hard to ask the boys to stay inside. The Lord did bless us with a garage that they could run around in, and later we were able to get a ping pong table. So that was great. And then, as you guys know, Jordan had his head injury, and that was 8 weeks of intense emotional roller coaster ride for all of us. Later found out that he did have a concussion because of the symptoms he was showing, and that was hard. For me, that was the hardest season in Peru. Forget trying to learn a foreign language and navigate the city. Just caring for him, just being a mom was hard during that season. So for a while we were in what I would call survival mode of just trying to get through the day. I felt like the Lord was always with us, always gave us grace, always gave us strength to get through it, always provided us with what exactly we needed. We got our furniture when we needed it before the lockdown happened. We got our beds before we needed them. We didn't have pictures on the wall or things like that, but we didn't need that. We don't have a TV, we don't have a DVR, but we didn't need that. We had the devices that we needed to be able to do virtual online classes. So, yeah.
All right, well, thanks for sharing that. Church family, as we talked about quite a bit back in November about the missionary task, I wanted to ask the Smiths some specific questions related to the missionary task. And I'm sure that you all remember it. It starts with entry and then evangelism, discipleship, church planting, leadership development, and then ultimately exit, leaving that healthy church, healthy, vibrant, growing church to reach that community. So as we think about what it means in the entry phase, of course, we often think about just getting in the country and finding a place to live and all those things, and you certainly haven't had to navigate all that. But specifically share with us what it's been like with language and culture and the religious background of the people that you're trying to reach, what that has looked like for you guys.
Well, it's a long answer, but the short answer is it doesn't look the same for everybody. Language acquisition is never easy. Regardless of how much you have going into the country from other travels, the language in Peru is specific depending on whether you're talking to a Venezuelan, whether you're talking to a Peruvian, are they from Lima, are they from the mountains, or from the jungle. Cultural differences. Again, there's differences between growing up in the city and being from the mountains or from the jungle areas. But the first step in entry with that is just getting to know them. So when we would go into Hicamarca or start talking to somebody that we don't know, we don't immediately start sharing the gospel with them. We have to start by establishing a relationship. They're very open to you sharing things with them, but we found it easier to talk about what we have in common, what we can learn from each other, and then as opportunities open up, we can then begin to share the gospel with them.
Thinking to the second phase of evangelism, I know there's been some interesting developments there, especially with some folks from Venezuela that you've been able to minister to and try to share the gospel with. Share how those evangelistic efforts are going during this season.
Sure. Well, each one is a case-by-case basis. These Venezuelans have had to flee their country, and they've landed in Peru just to set up new roots and try to survive. So COVID actually provided us an opportunity to establish a foothold with these people that we wouldn't have had otherwise necessarily, is to physically meet their needs through food. When they were not able to work because everything shut down, we were able to provide baskets of food, bags of food, take them to the grocery store. One example would be a man that I knew prior to COVID, before us moving down, through a relationship we had when we had teams come down from Swift Creek, a security guard at a hotel. Well, when things got locked down very tight, I used a missionary pass to be able to get out and freely roam about the city, to specifically go to the hotel and to check on him. Come to find out, he had been stuck there for weeks, almost 2 months, where he wasn't able to go back to his family. He was locked down at the hotel so he could keep his job. And through that, I was able to find out that his family was in need. They were lacking some basic food items. So I was able to get his address, his wife's name, contact information. I was able to go over and visit the family and take them food and be invited in their home to be able to present the gospel to them as well. Through the course of this, the security guard, Juan Carlos, has accepted Christ.
Wow.
And in the months that followed, that was in August, was when he finally accepted. But after that, we've gone through 12 or 13 discipleship courses or lessons in the material to sit alongside of him, or sometimes virtually go through these lessons. The most incredible experience was the week before we came back here stateside. I wanted to get one more lesson in person before we had to move virtual for the time that we're here in the States. And we got done with that discussion in 30 or 45 minutes through that lesson. And I'm thinking, all right, it's time to go on about our day. I don't want to keep this guy too long. He turns the page in the book, and we start right in on the next lesson. I was like, okay, I'm prepared. I've done this lesson before. Let's roll on. He did that again. We moved on to a third lesson. So now we're in this thing for about 2 or 2.5 hours. And we finally got booted out of the place that we were meeting inside a mall. Technically, we weren't supposed to be in there just talking about this. We were supposed to be either shopping or in a food court eating. We went to a park and did a fourth lesson.
Wow.
So we could do this in person before I went back stateside.
Yeah.
So since I left, he's already done another lesson virtually and sent it to me. I'll send him comments back. We have a discussion. So it's nice to see someone that's accepted Christ, that is excited about understanding more than he knew originally.
Let me ask you kind of a follow-up on that. I really appreciate the way our International Mission Board focuses in and uses some of these mercy ministries, like providing food. And I know there was a great partnership, especially early on, with Cristo El Salvador to provide food for people up at Hicamarca, really as a way to open the door for, well, of course, to first meet an incredible need that they had, but also to open doors for the gospel. Share how that all worked out.
Sure. Well, you mentioned the Southern Baptists. Specifically, that food assistance is coming through their leg of the organization known as Send Relief. And as participants with the International Mission Board, we had access to apply to receive those funds. So every step of the way, I included Pastor Ceballos and some of the members from his church, because they needed to be the ones seen as providing the need in the community, their own community, as well as Hicamarca. We didn't want it to be perceived as it's the foreign missionary that's providing these things. Yeah. So we were able to meet food assistance needs in the community of Hicamarca, along with Gospels of John, and every time we handed out these bags, so that we do have the opportunity, if not on distribution day, but an ability to follow up afterwards.
Yeah.
We believe that providing for their physical, material needs when employment was not possible is going to open up the need to meet their spiritual condition at a later date.
Yeah. My favorite part of that story, though, you didn't quite mention, and that's the fact that the members at Cristo El Salvador also contributed to this offering to buy the food. And so it was your efforts as, an IMB missionary, as well as the funds from Send Relief, as well as the funds that the members from Cristo El Salvador provided. And no one really knew how much of that money came from where.
That's right.
And so that's an exciting thing. And I think it's so crucial, too, that the people in Jicamarca saw that money coming from Cristo El Salvador.
They did.
And that's really going to be a great open door for the gospel to go forth. Holly, I know you've had a couple of opportunities to develop some relationships with people that thankfully speak English. And so share
Yeah.
a little bit about that.
Yeah. So later on in the lockdown, as things started to open up a little bit more, they gave the kids a little bit more freedom. They could have a half an hour of play outside, then it went to an hour of play outside. One of Jordan's classmates is an only child, and obviously has been greatly affected of having to be home alone.
Yeah.
And his mom actually was a part of removing his stitches when Jordan had his head injury, and that's God just kind of kept putting us together. I had met her one time before lockdown, and she had actually invited us to join her at her beach home, which we were like, I don't know you, but okay. And so she reached out to me and she said, I really want to get the boys together. Would you feel comfortable with that? Because at that time we were still supposed to be wearing masks. We weren't, we're supposed to be social distancing. We're still supposed to be very, very careful. And I said, I'm fine with doing that. If you want to do that, that's great. And so anyway, we were able to get together, and the boys had a blast. I think we were at her house for 3 or 4 hours, and we drank coffee and tea and just really got to know each other and talked. And she's been to the States before and has done a lot of travel due to medical stuff, and just really hit it off. And so we've been able to, since then, I've been able to have her son Brian hang out with us for a little while she had to do stuff, and just got to share with her a little bit about, my beliefs. And she just said to me, I've never really met anyone like you that has been willing to come and, be a missionary, from live in a foreign country. And so you could just tell that her wheels are turning. But it's been good to get to know her, and she says that she respects, what we believe. But they're at the school with the boys. I mean, her son is attending, the Christian school, and he's hearing the Bible lessons. And so my prayer is that they'll come to know the Lord, and that we'll get together, more and be able to talk more in general. That's been good for me, because I feel like the Lord has said, in spite of not knowing the language, Holly, here's some people that could really use, encouragement and, uplifting and stuff. And so I'm excited to get back and kind of kick it off, start again. So.
All right. Well, of course, the third step in this missionary process is discipleship. You've already shared, Jonathan, some of the things that you're doing with some of these Venezuelan refugees, and Juan Carlos in particular. But share with us what the church partnership is doing to try to disciple the believers that are up in Jicamarca.
Sure. That's perhaps the most encouraging thing that we've seen this year. So what we did is we formed 4 teams of 2 people from Cristo El Salvador, our evangelistic and missions team. And in these groups of 2, we would be responsible for at least 1 new believer in Jicamarca, sometimes 2. And each of our teams would coordinate with those individuals to plan which day and time worked for them, for us to go sit with them outside their home and to do a 1-hour discipleship lesson. That's been going on since July. So that's going to transition into what comes next with the formation of the church. Our desire and our hope is when restrictions are finally lifted and we're able to physically meet in Jicamarca, these 8 or 10 or 11 believers that have been discipled up in that community, we're finally going to be able to introduce all of them to each other. Right now, I'm sure they feel like we're the only Christians living in this community because they're not able to mingle with others. We can't wait to bring them all together in one place after all this is maybe not over, but loose enough to where we're allowed to get together. And they realize that they're not alone. And that's when we're going to start seeing this church body being formed.
All right. Well, you really touched on church planting, and of course that's the next big phase. And church, that's something that we can be praying for in the coming year, that as those individual believers come together to begin to form this church, that they would demonstrate the love of Christ to one another and be welcoming and accepting to each other. Have you noticed in any of those folks that are being discipled there, are there potential leaders beginning to develop that you can recognize at this point? Or is that something we just still need to be praying for?
Well, we always need to be praying for it.
Yes.
But what's interesting is that it's not really best for us as humans to try to figure out who these potential leaders are. God already knows who they are. So our job is to try to develop the leadership capabilities, the biblical leadership capabilities in all Christians throughout this discipleship process, and let God reveal it to us at the time that we need to know. So we're constantly looking, we're investing in all of them. And the other part of that is, I think we're still working on developing additional leaders in Cristo El Salvador. I had mentioned before about we're working in teams of 2. Part of this discipleship and evangelistic goal is to make it so that the people living in Jicamarca are the ones that are going to evangelize and disciple their own community. Now, we're in the first phase of that, where we're having to be the catalyst for that. But we're doing it in such a way that the next level of people we start meeting with, we're going to split up our groups of 2 from Cristo El Salvador, and we're going to make, instead of 4 groups of 2, we're going to make 8 groups of 1. We're each going to take a person in Jicamarca that has already gone through the discipleship process to form a new group of 2, because that leads towards an exit strategy, which exits, sure, at the end of the process, but we have all of these processes, every step of the process is with the exit in mind. We have to understand, how are we going to remove ourselves from this church planting community so that a healthy church remains and they're able to continue and plant more churches without us, Cristo El Salvador, or the Missionary, without us having to be involved in it. And I think the best way to do that, we've collectively agreed the best way to do that, is to do through that process of, we'll show you how to do it. All right, next you're going to do it with us. We're going to sit beside you while you do it. We'll be a resource for you as you move forward and you do it without us. And that's the best way to transition out.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, great, Jonathan. I mean, church, that is the perfect explanation of what it means to start with the end in mind, strategically all along the way, working toward exiting out of the ministry and leaving a healthy church that's reaching its community and the world. As we wrap this up, what are some specific things we can be praying for you guys about as you make plans to go back to Peru in January?
I mean, for me, it's always language. You realize how important it is to know a language, to be able to communicate. So I think for me, learning the language, even the boys learning the language so that they can better communicate to the local kids there and the local teenagers and stuff. We've been told before that sometimes the greatest connections that you make are through your kids, and I've seen that, So that's the biggest thing, and obviously continued health. I mean, the Lord has given us great health, and I continued that protection, and safety and protection for our families.
Another thing that's very important for us moving forward is Pastor Ceballos, and for the church members at Cristo El Salvador. This church, I can't explain to you how passionate they are about reaching this community of Jicamarca. They are actively engaged in that community, and even in a year when it's been so restricted. So I'm looking forward to getting back, and we need prayer for what does it look like in 2021. We would love to be able to host teams from Swift Creek in this coming year. We're just at this point, we're not in a place to know whether or not that can happen. So pray for us. We anticipated moving to Peru to be able to see or host a group from Swift Creek every 3 or 4 months. It didn't turn out like that. And for the foreseeable future in 2021, it's not going to be able to happen either. So that's been an adjustment on our part. Continue to pray for us. Yes, we've been there 11 months, but there are times where you still long to see a familiar face. When we finally got back here in December, seeing people that you used to be with here every single week, and then you've only talked to them virtually or on the phone throughout 11 months, you don't realize how much you missed it and how much you need that until you get it again. You kind of compartmentalize that and shove it aside as best you can, because that's what you need to do to keep moving forward. But we hope to have teams come down this coming year So it's a long way to say we need continued prayers for us to continue to get used to the adjustments of living in a foreign country, getting used to not being around other people that look like us, talk like us. That's been a big adjustment this year. We knew a little bit about it before we got there, but we got an extra large dose of it through COVID restrictions. So that's one way. We also need prayer for the strength of Pastor Ceballos. He's had a couple of health-related things come up in the last couple of years. He's in his 60s. He's not going to be pastoring forever. So the church at some point will have to determine, and Pastor Ceballos, at what point do they transition to another pastor? What does that look like? All the same time where we're trying to identify leadership and a pastor for this new church plant in Jicamarca, we don't have the answers. And even if we thought we had the answers, we still need prayer to be a huge part of that so that we don't try to do things that make sense to us. We want to do what God wants us to do in that community with Cristo El Salvador as well as Jicamarca.
All right, Jonathan and Holly, thanks so much for sharing all that. Well, I hope you've learned a lot about the ministry work that the Smiths are doing in Peru. And I hope you've got some new things on your prayer list to be praying specifically for them about during this upcoming season. And church, we hope you'll be praying about going on the next time we can have a trip to Peru. And of course, the first step in being able to go international is to get your passport. So I encourage you to do that. And we trust that the Lord's going to do great things through the Smiths and our partnership with Cristo El Salvador to reach Jicamarca and to see a healthy, vibrant, gospel-preaching, world-reaching church there in Jicamarca. God bless.